I have a very simple question for you today, and that is there a space that exclusively belongs to men, not to boys, not to girls, not to women, but to men? It is the domain for them to be recreational and informal and to have fellowship with one another and to cut their teeth essentially on one another, and for them to laugh and joke and for them to enjoy the presence of one another without the added encumbrances that come from the opposite gender and from youth. Any of them. Because it seems to me that if you look through human history, there was a lot of them. And now I don't think there's any. There's no space in which a man could say, this is my space. I'm allowed in here because I am a man. And you are not allowed in here because you are not a man. Is there any space in which that is an acceptable explanation for who is and who is not allowed in? I'd say none. There's no such atmosphere, environment, anywhere in culture. And that's a problem because it seems like every single time that there has been one, that those things have been gradually eroded, taken away from men, given to women. And I have a few examples of this. It actually was highlighted to me through a Netflix documentary on sports, that it highlighted all these different third world, mostly competition sports that only exist there, but they also have these elements that are very human, and and they intentionally try to play up how transcendent a lot of the features of them are. And in one example, there's water buffalo drag racing in Bali, in Indonesia, that people will literally, they get two cows and they put them next to each other and they plow them through these flooded rice paddies, the same way that John Force made famous with funny cars and drag races here in the United States. And in fact, throughout it, it's peppered with these different quotes from significant people of the motorsports world in Europe and in Asia and in the US, from Bill France of NASCAR to Formula One and whatever. And the last episode, probably intended to be planned as the crescendo of the entire thing, is a discussion, an explanation of this specific form of Indian wrestling, which plays up the tradition of it at the beginning, that since 5000 BC, so we're talking about 7,000 years of documented Indian history, there's been these dirt floor huts in which men would gather in a village and they would wrestle with each other, and they have these specific forms in which they would wrestle with each other and rules, and that it was one of the rite of passages for a young man in a culture and in a village, for him to earn his stripes, his place, his space among the men of his village by competing against them in this form of wrestling. And then it pivots to this A plot, B plot story, weaving the tradition and how that there's these two girls that are supposed to be representative of all of the women in India that are trying to infiltrate or to inject themselves into those specific fighting arenas, that that through progress and through feminist intervention in Indian culture, that women have actually begun to take over some of those akshas, so that there's some of them that have been banned, forbidden for men to enter them, because They're wanting to keep the women safe from having to compete against a man. And then sort of like, well, that's just it's a form of it's its own form of lack of progress, because girls can do anything a man can do, and they can do anything, and they can compete against a man as well, and all this kind of thing. And it's frustrating for me because of the fact that women have spaces, but men don't in today's society. And that when a man doesn't have a space to go, it's sometimes referred to culturally or sociologically as a third space, third place. That it's a place you go outside of the home for the purpose of spending time that is not connected to your employment, which that's a whole other conversation worth having too. But the idea that it's the bars, it's the pubs, it's all the stuff that we sacrificed during the pandemic, churches and social clubs and exercise environments, things of that nature, so that you go there, you spend time, you build relationships with the people that are there, that you only go to that space maybe to meet with them, you only meet those people at that space, and that in that context as well, that it's essential for mental health to be able to have those places to go, to look forward to going to them. That and society used to be full of them, specifically for men. That you have the boys' clubs, the Young Men's Christian Association, and that in Indianapolis there's a massive building that was specifically for German immigrants. That it was a place where they would go, and it was a spa, and that it was essentially like a YMCA, but it was specifically for people that were of German descent. In fact, for a long time inside, it was required that you speak fluent German when you were inside. It's no longer that way. But it's something that it's a place to go and be. It's something that, like the theme song from Cheers, right? Place you want to go where everybody knows your name. It's something that churches have kind of had a cornerstone on for a long time. It's a place you go, that you know people, and that you are known by them. So it's one of the things about social clubs that tend to be tied to politics, the Skull and Bones or the Freemasons or whatever, these things that people have suggested that you can't get into politics and be successful if you're not a member of these organizations. And that's sort of true, but not for the reason people are trying to suggest. It's that you have to be known, and that you need to know, right? That it's not about what you know content-wise, it's about who you know context-wise. And that when you know someone that has power, they have the ability to give you advantages, etc. So there's a lot of things that are flowing into this, but it's causing innumerable issues without having those spaces for men specifically to go to. Like, we're wondering in our society about mental health. We're wondering, why is it that there's such a large rash or spike in mental health issues, while at the same time taking away from men the places for them to go? And I can hear someone already typing, like, just because a woman's there doesn't mean that men are not allowed, which is not always true. But the thing is, there's a certain kind of fellowship men can only get from men. They can't get it from women, they can't get it from boys, and they can't get it from girls. They can only get it from other men. And that when you take away in society spaces for those men to gather together and be like iron sharpening iron, what you end up doing is you've cut off men from the most important resource that they have, and that you force them into a position where Their most significant relationships are now with women and children. And it reduces their ability to strengthen their strengths. Without the ability to strengthen men's strengths, weaknesses take over. And that's why in that isolation that we've been experiencing recently, you have depression, anxiety, alcoholism, pornography, misogyny. These things are beginning to overwhelm people because of the fact that they don't have another man in their life to say, shut the F up. That's what society needs. Men, especially in the idea that men were once all boys. The only way to get from being a boy to a man is to have a man tell you that you've become one. The only way to have a man tell you you've become one is to be in a space where they can show you what that looks like and that they can bestow that upon you. And so this is kind of what I'm getting at, that the church, Christians need to step up here, in that they need to take up that social slack and stop putting aside the needs of men. They need to intentionally, I might even say overproduce content and contexts for men to be able to gather exclusively with other men. And that if they don't have those things, the men in that church are going to be weak. They're going to be overwhelmed by their weaknesses. So, that's the goal. That, in fact, what we need is to be able to begin to aggressively attacking the problem of disenfranchised men. And that as you do so, you're going to have the heads of household, you're going to have the disorganized, isolated males, both of them. And that when you put those two people together with the Word of God and with strong spiritual mentors, what you're going to have is a reduction in violence, you're going to have a reduction in addiction, you're going to have a reduction in mental health problems. So, society benefits when men are strong. The church, therefore, needs to become a primary advocate of strong men.